So today we are on a new day. So my human friends, and particularly my Dharma friends, spiritual friends, I'd like to express good morning, my greetings and good morning to everyone. So as I said yesterday, all of us want happiness and do not want suffering, but want happiness. So of course, even animals cause problems among themselves due to attachment, anger, and so forth. But as human beings, we use our intelligence to serve our negative emotions of attachment, anger, and so forth. And therefore, we cause lots of bloodshed and lots of killings and so forth. A lot of problems amongst ourselves. We do not cause havoc even only amongst ourselves as human beings, but we actually cause lots of destruction and problems to the animals and other living things on this planet. And so all of us do talk about peace, peace, peace in the world, but the true peace is actually contingent upon us humans. So what I think is that historically there had been lots of conflicts, fightings, battles, wars, including the two world wars. So all of this happened because of this narrow-minded thinking of me, me, me. And then, historically speaking, we know that many kings, in order to protect their own dominion and so forth, they actually indulged in wars and battles. So what I say is, war and battles have to do with feudalism, because the feudal lords, because they have some kind of a dominion over certain land, in order to protect that, they cause these troubles. So of course, there has been lots of progress and advancements in the world. For example, after the Second World War, the United Nations organizations was set up, not just for one nation or one community, but for the whole world. And then in Europe, in order to thinking of the European nations as a whole, they set up the European Union. And so the European Union, for example, if it had not been set up for the last few decades, I usually say that there must have been some fightings amongst the member nations of the European Union. And because of the European Union being set up, there had not been such wars and battles amongst the member nations. And then, for example, also in India, there were lots of kingdoms in the past. But since the Indian Union was set up, these kingdoms had not much to do with the nation as a whole. And so the union has been made very great difference. So in this world there are many people, many places where people face lots of problems and difficulties, and therefore the United Nations is there to look, is looking after all these people in problems and difficulties. And therefore, as I said yesterday, there are 7 billion people on this earth. All of us live on this same planet, this one single planet. So we need to be in solidarity, whether in good days or bad days. So we need oneness, the sense of oneness of human beings. So if you travel by spacecraft to the into the space, it is said that there's no physical boundary amongst the nations that is seen from the space. And therefore, with the sense of oneness of human beings, we should know that this thinking of our own, the particular community's needs only is outdated. So if you live in a community, if you think about a community, or for example a family, if you are friendly amongst one another in the family and in the community, you can always think that others have your back. And so, of course, thinking about me, my family, my community, my nation, and I mean, these cause lots of problems, and therefore we need, it is very important to have the sense of oneness of humanity. So in the different religious traditions, for example, they talk about all human beings being, bringing happiness or joy and happiness to all human beings. And this is the case with also within Buddhism. And therefore, without thinking of me, mine, and so forth, we should think of us, human beings, as a whole. And so the religious traditions are helpful to human beings because the message of all these religious traditions is love and compassion. Despite the difference in philosophical ideas. So it's like food. If you go to a restaurant and if you get only one kind of food, that won't be so attractive. But if you have varieties of food, then you can have different choices. And so, if you have only one thing that you can think about, it won't be so exciting. And so, these different religious traditions, I think, are beneficial to human beings. And so, all these religious traditions, we should think that they have the same message for us. So in the past, there had been lots of fightings amongst the followers of different religious traditions, but all of these fightings and quarrels and so forth have to do with political matters. And so the kings and lords and so forth, the landlords and so forth, have used this as a tool for their gain. And so all the religious traditions, we should know that they are religions of human beings, and therefore we should be in harmony amongst ourselves as human beings. So as I'm doing an introduction to Buddhism, as I quoted Master Aryadeva yesterday, where he said that First, prevent the demeritorious actions, and in the middle, prevent the idea of a coarse self, and later prevent the views of all kinds. Whoever knows of this is wise. And then we also, I also mentioned about the 16 factors for higher rebirth. So, when my late senior tutor, Yongzhen Ling Rinpoche, was alive, he gave the Upasaka vows or precepts to an elderly Tibetan man from the western part of Tibet here in Dharamsala. And as he explained these precepts, the 5 precepts for a lay person, and he was explaining about not taking alcohol. This elderly man, Tibetan man, told Yongzhen Ling Rinpoche that he cannot give up drinking alcohol. And then Ling Rinpoche kindly gave him advice not to drink too much to the point of getting drunk. And so, within the 16 factors for higher rebirth, we have the practice of not taking alcohol and so forth. And the verse from Aryadeva, where he says, which I quoted earlier, first prevent the demeritorious ones. And then, with regard to Master Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyama Kakarika, where in the 22nd chapter, in the beginning, he says that the Tathagata is neither his aggregates, no different from it. Tathagata is not in the aggregates, nor the aggregates are in him. And so I actually switch Tathagata to my own self, saying I am neither one with the aggregates nor different from it, and so forth. And so when you actually are able to understand that, when you understand that everything, including myself or yourself, is dependently arisen, I mean, there's nothing left for you to objectify and grasp at. And therefore, in the second line of Aryadeva's code, where he says in the middle, prevent this notion of a self. And you have to understand that there is no person or self which is independent apart from the body and the mind aggregates. As if the I or the self is like a governor or a ruler over the mind-body constituent. And then the third line is that in the end, and so that's about the second line. And in the Buddhist literature, where it teaches the view of selflessness or anatma, this is to counter our negative emotions, these destructive emotions of attachment, anger, hatred, and so forth. Because when you talk about being attached to something, you always think of yourself. And so there is this attachment to yourself as if you are someone independently existing. And that is countered by this understanding of selflessness. And then the destructive emotions, including the 3 poisons of attachment, hatred, and ignorance. In order to destroy all of these destructive emotions or the mental afflictions, the third line says, in the end, destroy all views, distorted views, is actually talking about this. getting rid of the fundamental ignorance or grasping at some kind of independently existing self. And this understanding of a non-inherent existence of a self, coupled with that of the bodhicitta, the compassion, is able to destroy the fundamental ignorance clinging to the independent existence, together with its stains left by them. And then Master Shantideva says that all happiness in the world comes from selfishness, and all suffering comes from cherishing others over oneself. And then Shantideva also says that unless you are able to switch your selfish attitude, your joy and happiness with the suffering of others, there's no way you can attain Buddhahood. And even in samsara, you will not have happiness. And therefore, with these understandings, he further says that the which wise or intelligent person does not despairs to ride the horse of Bodhichitta, this spirit of enlightenment, which leads one from blissful state to blissful state. And therefore, and then in the verses for Bodhicitta, we also say that I shall having developed the spirit of highest enlightenment, I shall invite all sentient beings as my guests, and I shall delightfully enact the supreme enlightened conduct. So, because the root of all our troubles, problems, and difficulties is this self, grasping at an independent self, we need to destroy that. And therefore, the third line of Aryadeva's verse, which says, in the end, destroying all distorted views. And so when I think along these lines, that regarding the wisdom side and the method side of bodhicitta, the wisdom side of emptiness or selflessness, and then I find them really helpful. Let's move on now to chapter 4 of the Bodhichitta. So I have some Western friends who also recite these lines which are mentioned in the 4th chapter. So these are the 20 verses. They do recite it on a daily basis. So I also recite this on a daily basis. And so at the end, I conclude this. So it begins at verse number 465. Therefore, in the presence of an image or a monument or something else, say these 20 verses 3 times every day. And then so may I be as dear to sentient beings as verse number 484 says, may I be as dear as to sentient beings as their own life, and may they be even more dear to me. May their ill deeds fructify for me, and all my virtues fructify for them. As long as any sentient being anywhere has not been liberated, may I remain in the world for the sake of that being, though I have attained highest enlightenment. And so I do conclude my practices with these prayers, particularly these 2 lines. And so this actually bounds up with the 3rd line of Ayadeva's verse. And so this Buddhist tradition that we have in Tibet was established on the Tibetan soil by the kind Abbot Chandrakshitta, and with the help of the Tibetan Dharma king Chizung Detsen. And so, as the Buddha had said, what we follow is reason. Where the Buddha says, "O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by burnishing, cutting and rubbing, likewise you should examine my teaching thoroughly, examine my teaching, and then accept it, not because you have devotion or faith in me." And so we follow this instruction or the statement of the Buddha, following the tradition that was established by the kind ancestors and Master Chandrakshitta on the Tibetan soil, without taking the teachings for granted on the basis of faith alone. And therefore, we have a very profound and very extensive study of philosophy, Buddhist practices, through logic and reasoning. So even if you may not have any belief in the religion as such, if you follow reason and logic, you'll be able to see, be rather far-sighted in going about with your life, because you'll be able to understand that things are actually, they come about through causes and conditions. Because of this and that condition, because of this and that factor, such and such, when this and that if effect arises and so forth, you'll be able to understand that. And then you will also be able to develop the 4 types of wisdom or intelligence, which are the vast wisdom of vastness and greatness and depth, profound wisdom, and swift wisdom. And so studying logic will help in developing the swift wisdom as well as the profound wisdom and so forth. And so these 4 types of wisdom, the great extensive wisdom and so forth. And so we, as followers of the Nalanda tradition, we follow Master Nagarjuna, which is also the case with the Chinese followers of Buddhism as well. And so, Master Nagarjuna's the fundamental treatise of the middle way, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, is there in Chinese translation as well. And today, China has the biggest Buddhist population in the world. So, in any case, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, since it's in Chinese, if the Chinese Dharma brothers and sisters could actually study this text, it would be able to help them. Whether you believe in a past and future lives or not, in this life, it'll definitely be beneficial to you to study this text. And then similarly, the Japanese Dharma brothers and sisters, you seem not to have much interest in doing study of Buddhism. When I was in Japan, gave a talk in Japan in a monastery, and I expressed that it would be good to use the monastery for discussions on Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist practice, and so forth. So Japan, being a follower of the Nalanda tradition as well, you could do that. And then there are Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. So of course the people in these countries follow the Theravada tradition, which is fundamental to Buddhism, which is very good. You have a great practice of Vinaya and so forth. And as a supplement to this, if you could take interest in logic from the Sanskrit tradition, I am sure it would be beneficial to you. So I just wish to express this to them. We are in the 21st century today. All people on this earth do not want suffering but want happiness. They are equal in that. If you have peace in the world, there will not be suffering. And so, in order to not have suffering, we need peace in the world. And for peace, as I said earlier, if you look at history, just thinking of, all these wars and conflicts happened because of the narrow-minded thinking of me and mine. So that's outdated, and therefore if we could think of the whole world as one family, it would be happy, it would be helpful to bring about happiness, of peace and happiness in the world. So it would be beneficial to everyone. So in the Himalayan regions of India, in our monastic institutions, there are the people or monks and nuns from the Himalayan regions of India, for example. So these monastic institutions, many in South India and other places, they study the texts written by Nalanda masters, the 17 Nalanda masters, rigorously through debate, logic, and reasoning. And so far, everyone has done their best to preserve this profound and vast tradition of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And then we have the people from the Himalayan regions of India. Once I've met a group of Himalayan, an organization that they have formed, the Tawang Foundation thing, and they. So all in our tradition, we do talk about the profound lineage tradition of the view, and the lineage of the profound view, and the lineage of the extensive conduct, and then the lineage of the practice, the blessing lineage of the practice. But though we do talk about the extensive, the lineage of the profound view and so forth, there's some lack of study of Buddhist tradition in the Himalayan regions as well. And therefore, if you pursue the study of Buddhist philosophy through logic and reason, and then on top of that practice Tantra, then you will actually see the special characteristic of the Buddhist tradition that we have. Otherwise, the tantric practices would just be like some kind of ritualistic practice without real understanding of the basic teachings of the Buddha. So, if you are able to study Buddhist philosophy through logic and reasoning, and then go into tantric practice, having the basic fundamental understanding of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, then you will actually see the efficacy of Tantra as well. So, of course, we have in the tantric practice, there are different practices of using the winds and channels and drops and so forth, but they are also there in the non-Buddhist Hindu traditions as well. So, as Tibetans also, I usually tell them that the Nalanda tradition has been established on the Tibetan soil, and this is our fortune as Tibetans. That we have to, and this tradition that we have, the Nalanda monastic university tradition of Buddhism, is also, we can say, the treasure of the world at large. And then, amongst the Tibetan monastic institutions, there is the Nyingma tradition, Nyingma monastic institution of Namdrol in South India, in Balakupi. So they have also the study of Buddhist philosophy, philosophical and logic and epistemological texts. And then in Sakya tradition as well, we have also the study of logic and philosophy. And so this is something that we need in all the monastic institutions to study Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy through logic and reason. And then in the West also we have increasing number of people, even from the amongst the scientists, who are taking interest in Buddhist tradition that we have, because we are able to explain the teaching of the Buddha on the basis of the understanding of dependent arising, interdependent nature of things by the logic and reason. They are interested. They are attracted to it. And then the essence of Buddhism comes down to these 2 points, that of the ethical conduct of not harming others and the philosophical view of the interdependent nature of things. And so interdependent nature of things also has some connection with science, and that of non-violence based on compassion has to do with the religious tradition as well. And so we are in a free nation, India, the great nation of India. So we need to use this opportunity that we have to pursue the study of Buddhism, Buddhist tradition, philosophy and so forth. And whatever we have studied, we need to integrate them within ourselves for practice, so that whatever we study does not just become a sophistry, instrument of sophistry. As Tisshu Rinpoche used to tell me when he was alive, sometimes he used to joke with me, saying the geshes may be learned, but there is no fruit on that tree of the geshes learning. They only indulge in words. And so, if you just pay lip service to the Dharma, that's not going to be helpful. If you don't practice and integrate the teaching within yourself, but be learned and be able to talk to others about Buddhism, that's not going to be helpful, beneficial. And therefore, what you need to do is, through your study, you need to develop conviction through reflection on the teaching derived from the contemplation. You need to develop conviction, and that conviction has to be translated into experience within yourself through meditation. And so, this is how you should go about with the teaching of the Buddha. And so, please keep this in mind. So I also feel proud sometimes, as Je Tsongkhapa has said, I've become a monk following the teaching of the Buddha, and have become learned, and then a yogi practicing the teaching of the Buddha. And therefore, through the integration of the teaching within oneself and practice, meditation and so forth, I feel myself rather calm within myself. And so I feel also physically healthy. And so please do that. And then we have lots of monastics from the Himalayan regions of India who have been really helpful in re-establishing the monastic institutions in India after coming into exile. And so today the situation is quite critical in the world. So scientists and experts, and particularly those who are in the front line of treating the patients with this COVID-19 disease, even some of them even sacrifice their own life. They also treating their patients. So I sincerely rejoice and appreciate their efforts, the nurses and the doctors and the caretakers. So when such things like this happen in the world, we should not feel demoralized at all, because that does not help anybody. And so when we have difficulties amongst humans, if we as human beings do not work to solve the problem, who else will do it? And so I appreciate all the doctors, nurses and the caretakers of the disease, the patients and so forth. I would like to encourage them to keep up with their effort. And then there have been many different organizations, monasteries, nunneries and so forth as well, big and small, who also have served the different communities in need. And then there are also monasteries and nunneries who also engage in prayers. So I've been asked to give a transmission of first I'll do the transmission of Shakyamuni Buddha. The mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha is Om Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. And then I'll do the Medicine Buddha, Baishaji Guru, and then Avalokiteshvara, who is the deity of compassion, and who is also the patron deity of Tibet. Om Mani Padme Hum is the mantra. And then Master Tsongkhapa's name praise, which I'll do the 4-line prayer of Master Tsongkhapa. And then, when the Buddhism was first established on the Tibetan soil, it was done through the help of Master Padmasambhava, together with Chandrakshita and the Tibetan king Sengtsen Gampo, who were known as the Ken Lop Chus, the trio of Ken Lop Chu. Ken refers to the abbot Chandrakshita, Lop, master for Master Padmasambhava, and Chu for Dharma king Chesung Detsen. And then I'll do the Master Padmasambhava's mantra, and then Arya Tara mantra, Mtare Tutare Ture Soha. So when you do these recitation of these mantras that I'll give the transmissions of, and if you could do it within the parameters of the view of emptiness and bodhicitta, it would be really beneficial. So after this, if you could also recite these mantras, the Aryatara mantra and the 6-syllable mantra of Avalokiteshvara and the Medicine Buddha mantra and so forth, in groups, if you can, if that's possible, or otherwise you can do it privately. So, if you can even recite these mantras, fearing the pandemic, and there would also be some health. So, my encouragement to you to recite these mantras, even if it may be just for a few